Black woman mocked in Jiu-Jitsu class, then taps out a black belt. In 15 seconds, Naomi Carter pulled into the parking lot of Iron Pulse Academy 15 minutes early, as she always did. The California sun shimmered across the sleek black hood of her car, but inside the vehicle, it was calm, air conditioning low, jazz humming gently through the speakers. She sat still for a moment, adjusting the brown belt draped over the passenger seat beside her. It was faded, frayed at the ends, well worn but deceptive. Because tucked deep in her duffel bag, beneath a rolled-up towel and water bottle, was her true rank. A black belt, awarded to her by one of the most revered figures in American Jiu-Jitsu history. Her grandfather. Naomi took a breath, steady but full. She didn't need to hype herself up. Her calm was practiced, purposeful. At 34, Naomi wasn't here to prove herself, not in the way most assumed. She was here on a mission. 3 months ago, her grandfather Elijah Carter had passed away in a quiet VA hospital bed. He was 91, sharp till the end, but fragile. On his last day, Naomi sat by his side holding his hand, surrounded by the scent of antiseptic and jasmine lotion she had rubbed into his aging skin since the day he moved in with her. And that day, with his voice raspy but clear, he whispered, "If you ever find a dojo where ego walks taller than honor, you show them what Carter Jiu-Jitsu really is." Promise me. She promised. That promise had brought her here, to Iron Pulse Academy. The school had a reputation. Glossy promotional videos on YouTube featuring punishing sparring sessions, instructors yelling at students to man up, and a disturbingly low female retention rate. Whispers on Reddit and niche martial arts forums described it as toxic, dismissive of anyone who didn't conform to its hyper-aggressive, testosterone-fueled hierarchy. It had become known for producing medalists at the cost of dignity. But Naomi hadn't come here to win a medal. She had come here to expose the rot. She stepped out of her car, adjusting the brown belt around her waist with a deliberate knot. Her gi was plain white, clean but unbranded. No academy patches, no personal flair, just the kind of blank slate that encouraged dismissal. She wanted to be underestimated. As she approached the building, she caught sight of her best friend Jade through the gym's tinted glass. Jade had joined the academy a month earlier, posing as a beginner-level student. She was waiting inside, phone already in place in her gym bag, discreetly recording. They'd choreographed this together. Jade would act like any regular student, keeping her distance from Naomi during the session, but keeping the footage rolling. It wasn't for social media. Naomi was preparing a presentation for an upcoming seminar on equity in martial arts, and she needed evidence. Real evidence. Inside, the front desk was manned by a lanky young man in a branded Iron Pulse hoodie. He looked up just long enough to register her gender, skin tone, and unassuming demeanor before returning to his phone. "I'm here for the advanced class," Naomi said, her voice level, with just a hint of curiosity. The guy gave her a glance, then looked her up and down, eyes settling on her belt. "Advanced is for brown belts and above," he said with a bored tone. "I am a brown belt, Naomi Carter," she replied, nodding toward the waiver sheet beside him. He raised an eyebrow but shrugged. "Sign the form. Locker rooms to your left." Naomi scribbled her name with a calm hand and walked through the door. The locker room smelled of menthol, old gym bags, and determination. Several women were changing already, most of them younger, muscles coiled tight with anticipation. She took a spot in the corner, moving with the grace of someone trying not to draw attention. Jade didn't even look at her, just kept chatting with another white belt about the last cardio day being a total killer. One of the women glanced at Naomi, a smirk playing at her lips. "Brown belt?" she asked, as if it were a joke. Naomi nodded once. Yeah, just moved here. Thought I'd check the scene. The woman, tall and broad-shouldered with a purple belt knotted tight around her waist, extended a hand. Marissa, just a warning. Coach Rojas doesn't really go easy on new folks, or women. Or especially women who claim rank without having tournament credentials. Naomi gave a small smile. Good to know. As she stepped onto the mats 10 minutes later, she felt the air shift. The dozen or so students present, mostly men in their 20s and 30s, glanced her way with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. One of them muttered something Naomi couldn't catch, followed by a chuckle. She ignored it. Then came the voice. Line up, by rank. It was low, firm, and unmistakably commanding. Vincent Rojas. He stepped onto the mat like he owned it, because here, he did. Early 40s, broad-chested, with a thick black beard, and a body carved out of protein shakes and self-importance. His black belt was pristine. His stare swept across the room, pausing slightly longer when it landed on Naomi. We have a new face, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Naomi bowed politely. Naomi Carter, brown belt. He walked toward her slowly, circling like a shark sniffing for weakness. Carter. No affiliation. No recent one. He gave a smirk. Well, welcome to Iron Pulse. Let's see if your jiu-jitsu speaks for itself. Partner up. Start warm-ups with triangle escapes. Naomi, you're with Luis. Luis was thick in the neck, stocky in the legs, and already grinning like he'd won something. I'll try not to break her, he joked to a friend. Naomi crouched and began the drill, letting Luis set the tone. He immediately over-tightened the triangle hold, going harder than necessary, pushing her shoulder into her neck in a way that was more domination than instruction. She didn't resist, not yet. She needed them to believe what they wanted to believe. After 10 minutes, Rojas clapped his hands again. Let's spar. Winner stays in? Naomi, you first. Against me. The room went silent. No instructor ever started off a new student's trial class with a spar, let alone a one-on-one in front of the whole class. Naomi bowed again. Happy to. Vincent gave a dismissive nod. We'll start standing. Let's see what 15 years of brown belt training looks like. They squared up. He moved forward with the confidence of someone used to overpowering opponents. Naomi kept her weight low, her eyes sharp. Rojas shot for a takedown. Sloppy, powerful, but careless. Naomi let him think he had it. She staggered back, let him pin her for a second. And then, in one breath, she shifted. Hips swung, arms slipped through, legs coiled, and before he could react, she locked in an armbar so clean it could be used in a textbook. His body jerked in confusion as her hips rose and the pressure hit his elbow. 4 seconds. Tap, Naomi said quietly. 5 seconds. Rojas struggled, stunned. 6. His hand slapped the mat. Silence. Naomi released the hold, rolled back into seated position, and bowed again. Thank you for the roll. The silence snapped like a rubber band. Jade's camera was still recording. Marissa's jaw had gone slack. Rojas stood slowly, avoiding Naomi's gaze. Lucky move, he muttered. Naomi didn't reply. She just smiled politely, turned, and walked back to the line. 15 seconds. That's all it took to change the balance of power in the room, and it was only the beginning. The buzz from Naomi's 15-second submission hadn't died down, not even close. Whispers swept across the mat like wildfire. She could feel the change in the air, subtle but undeniable. What started as disbelief now simmered into a mix of fascination, tension, and in some corners, resentment. Rojas tried to reclaim control, barking out a few rushed instructions, but his usual authority landed flat. It was hard to command respect when the entire class had just witnessed you getting tapped out with surgical precision by a woman you publicly mocked minutes earlier. "Partner up again," he said gruffly. "Situational sparring. Closed guard. Work for sweeps or passes." Luis, who earlier had grinned like he was about to toss Naomi around, now hesitated. So did half the class. Naomi didn't wait. She turned to a nearby woman in a purple belt, someone she hadn't spoken to yet. "Want a roll?" she offered. The woman blinked. "Yeah, sure. I'm Camilla. Naomi," she replied, and they bumped fists. While they worked the drill, controlled, smooth, respectful, Naomi's awareness never dimmed. Her senses stayed attuned to the room. Rojas was pacing near the wall, jaw tight, arms folded. His pride was bruised, and when men like him got bruised, they didn't heal. They festered. But Naomi wasn't afraid of Rojas. She had seen worse. Her grandfather had taught her long ago that real danger didn't always come from fists. It came from egos that refused to learn. After a few rounds, Rojas called a water break. Naomi made her way toward her gym bag, grabbing her bottle, and crouched near the edge of the mat. As she sipped, a shadow fell over her. She looked up. "You think you proved something?" Rojas said, voice low. She stood slowly, eye level with him now. "I didn't come here to prove anything. I came here to train." His laugh was dry. "You embarrassed me in front of my students." "No," Naomi replied. "You embarrassed yourself." For a beat, silence. Then he leaned closer, eyes narrowed. "I know who you are now." "I asked around during the last round." "Naomi Carter. Black belt. Trained under Elijah Carter, the legend who refused to compete because he thought sport corrupted the art." She didn't blink. "You say that like it's a bad thing." He shook his head slowly. "So what? You thought you'd waltz in here undercover and what? Teach me a lesson? Fix my gym? That how you honor his legacy?" Naomi set her bottle down and met his gaze. "I honor my grandfather by upholding what he believed. If the shoe fits, Vincent, maybe it's because you laced it yourself." His nostrils flared, but he didn't respond. Instead, he turned away and called for everyone to circle up again. His voice cracked a little on the first word. "All right. Quick announcement. This Friday, we're holding a team-only no GI round-robin session. Private sparring. Invite only." Naomi's brow furrowed slightly. Rojas looked directly at her. "And it's open to anyone who thinks they can back up their belt." There it was. An open challenge, but in private. Behind closed doors. She saw through it immediately. He wanted a rematch. A second chance, but not with an audience, at least not one that could call him out. He wanted to control the environment this time. Change the rules. Camilla leaned over and whispered, "Don't go. That's his trap." "He's been known to injure people who humiliate him." Naomi turned toward her. "Thanks, but I don't walk away from challenges." "Not when they matter." That night, after the class, Naomi sat at her kitchen table with Jade. The camera footage was uploaded, labeled, and encrypted. Jade had already started compiling the clips for the presentation, but she was quiet. Pensive. "I know you can handle yourself," Jade finally said, "but something about him. He's not just mad, he's threatened. You put a crack in his armor in front of the only world where he holds power." Naomi nodded slowly. "That's why I have to go Friday. Because if I back down, this whole thing becomes just another story of a woman who got lucky and then ran." Jade leaned back. "Then we plan for it." Cameras, witnesses, maybe even a second phone streaming quietly to the cloud. "If he's going to come at you again, he's going to do it with force, and we document everything." Naomi looked across the table, her voice quiet but firm.
"You've got my back?" "Always," Jade said. Friday came faster than Naomi expected.
When she walked into the academy that evening, it was already darker than usual. The main lights were dimmed. Only the mat was brightly lit, overhead fluorescents glaring down like stage lights. A few chairs had been set up on the sidelines. Half the faces were familiar from class, the other half weren't, likely hand-picked students or off-the-books brawlers Rojas trusted. No welcome. No smiles, just stares. She tied her hair back tighter, slipped on her rash guard and shorts, and stepped onto the mat. Rojas was already warming up, his black belt tied around his waist a little looser than usual, as if to remind everyone in the room who he was. "You showed," he said, without looking at her. "I said I would," she replied, stepping into the center. He looked up now, and for the first time, Naomi saw something new in his expression. Not confidence. Desperation. "Let's keep it clean," he said, but the tone betrayed him. He didn't mean it. They bowed. And the timer started. Rojas attacked fast, way faster than he had any right to, throwing his weight into a trip that nearly slammed Naomi off the mat. She absorbed the motion, rolled and scrambled up, forcing herself to stay centered. She could see it in his eyes. He wasn't here to train. He was here to punish. She let him push. Let him lunge again. And then, mid-charge, she shifted, slipped, and caught his arm just like she had days before. But this time, she didn't finish the armbar. She paused, held it, let the silence stretch. And then she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is the second time you underestimated me." Rojas grunted, twisting underneath her. She let him go. On purpose. He scrambled to his feet, red-faced, panting. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "Teaching," Naomi said. Gasps. He lunged again, sloppier this time, and Naomi reversed him with ease, flipping him to the mat and mounting before he even knew what hit him. From the edge of the mat, Jade's phone was live. Recording. Streaming. Naomi leaned forward, voice low but firm. "You're not losing to a woman. You're losing to your own ignorance." Rojas's limbs tensed, then went still. The room was silent again, and this time, no one looked away. The fallout from Friday's sparring session didn't just rattle the walls of the gym. It echoed across the entire local BJJ community. By Monday morning, clips from the match had already found their way into private martial arts forums, shared in hushed tones like digital contraband. A few anonymous Reddit accounts had posted screen grabs. Naomi Carter submitting Vincent Rojas cleanly. Twice. No edit, no excuses, no way to spin it. At first, Naomi thought the attention would die down quickly. Most underground gym gossip burned hot, then fizzled fast. But this time, it stuck. Because it wasn't just about a woman tapping out a black belt, it was about who she was and what she represented. By Tuesday, Naomi's inbox had exploded. Some emails came from women in jiu-jitsu, quiet thanks from strangers who'd faced the same belittlement and had walked away from the mats rather than speak up. Others came from coaches, skeptical but curious, wanting to know more about the way she trains. A few came from trolls, predictably cruel, accusing her of setting up the match, of using woke tactics to manipulate a good man. But the one message that stopped her cold came late that night. From an account named elijah.legacy@protonmail.com. The subject line was only one word: proud. Naomi sat frozen, hand hovering over her keyboard. No one knew that address. She had created it herself a year ago, right after her grandfather passed. It was meant to be a digital tribute. A storage folder for all of his training videos, scanned notebooks, and handwritten principles. And yet, Someone had used it. Inside was a single message. You did what I never could, Naomi. You stood inside their world and held your ground. The art is better because of you.
And so am I. There was no signature, no IP trail, just the message. She stared at the screen long after it faded to sleep mode. The next morning, the atmosphere at the academy was uneasy. Some students nodded to her now, hesitantly but respectfully.
A few of the younger ones who had only known Rojas as a hardline, competition-driven coach were clearly confused. Their loyalty wasn't broken, but it was dented. Rojas himself kept his distance.
He ran classes like nothing had happened, his voice just as loud, but the swagger was thinner, his words more clipped. And notably, he didn't call on Naomi once. Instead, he introduced a guest instructor on Wednesday night, Professor Trey Madsen, a Brazilian-American with a 5th-degree black belt and a reputation for competition dominance. He'll be running advanced drills for the next few weeks, Rojas announced to the class. We're taking the academy to a higher level. Naomi watched Trey walk onto the mat. He was tall, lean, with a calm energy that reminded her of old-school practitioners. His eyes swept over the room before resting briefly on her. No flicker of recognition. No hint of challenge. He simply nodded. The class began with flow drills, then transitioned to positional sparring. Naomi stayed sharp, deliberate, offering no excess movement. When paired with younger students, she slowed down to coach. When matched with higher belts, she held her own but didn't overextend. She could feel Trey watching her, studying the way she moved, not to judge, but to understand. After class, as students packed up, Trey approached her. "You're Carter's granddaughter," he said. Not a question, a statement. Naomi nodded. Yes. He smiled faintly. I trained with him once, in 04. He gave me the hardest 3-minute round of my life, then told me I needed to stop looking at jiu-jitsu like a scoreboard. Naomi chuckled softly.
Sounds like him. You rolled clean tonight, Trey added. I'd like to train with you sometime. Just you and me.
No audience. Naomi hesitated. You work with Rojas. Isn't that a conflict? Trey shook his head.
I'm not here for him. I'm here for the art. And I can tell you are too. They shook hands. That same week, Jade sent Naomi an encrypted video. It's from Camila, she said. She caught something you need to see. The footage was grainy, captured from a GoPro-style angle, likely clipped to someone's gym bag. It showed Rojas in the locker room after Friday's match, talking to 2 men Naomi recognized as part-time assistants. His voice was quiet but angry. She humiliated me. In front of my students. If she tries to step on my mat again, I'll make sure she regrets it. You get me? One of the assistants mumbled something inaudible. Then Rojas added, I don't care what belt she's wearing. We shut that narrative down before it spreads. Naomi leaned back in her chair, her chest tight. It wasn't just resentment anymore. It was sabotage. Later that week, Trey asked her to meet at a neutral gym. A friend of his ran a community dojo uptown, a place known for open mats and diversity. Naomi accepted. They rolled for almost an hour. No cameras. No audience, just jiu-jitsu. Trey's style was fluid, relentless, but never punishing. He flowed like a tide, and Naomi met it with solid base and calm transitions. Afterward, sitting against the wall, sweating, breathing hard, Trey finally spoke. He's afraid of you. Naomi didn't respond. He knows your presence alone shifts the culture. You're not just good, you're principled. That's scarier to him than any choke. Naomi stared at the ceiling. What do I do with that? Trey looked over. You make yourself undeniable.
Not just on the mats, but outside of them too. Speak up, be seen. And if he tries to erase you, you make sure the whole world sees who he really is. Naomi nodded slowly. It was no longer just about her grandfather's legacy. It was about every student who had been silenced. Every woman told to tone it down. Every outsider made to feel like they didn't belong. And now, the quiet war had a strategy. Not just resistance, reformation. Thursday evening arrived with the weight of something unspoken pressing on Naomi's chest. Her hands were steady, but her heart felt like it was pacing ahead of her. The atmosphere at Elite Edge Academy had shifted entirely. Some students avoided eye contact. Others glanced at her like they were waiting for a reason, any reason, to justify choosing sides. She walked through the front doors wearing her brown belt, just like every other day. Only now the belt felt like a spotlight, not a disguise. Inside the main training hall, Trey Madsen stood at the center of the mat, instructing a warm-up drill. Rojas wasn't present, which should have been a relief, but Naomi had learned long ago that silence from a man like Vincent Rojas didn't mean peace. It meant plotting. Trey's eyes met hers as she stepped onto the mat. He gave a slight nod, then continued speaking. Naomi fell into line with the rest of the class, flowing through hip escapes and technical stand-ups, tuning into the rhythm of the room. Everything looked normal, until the drill rotation ended and Rojas stepped out from the far hallway. He wasn't in a gi. He wore all black, sweat-wicking gear, compression sleeves, and the same intensity he wore like armor. His presence carved a hush through the room. "Everyone, line up," he said, his tone flat but loud enough to bounce off the walls. Trey hesitated a beat before stepping back. Naomi caught the brief glance they exchanged. Something wasn't right. Rojas continued, "We've got a special focus tonight. Competition pressure. Situational sparring under fatigue, simulating the stress of real matches." His eyes scanned the room, slow and deliberate, before locking onto Naomi. "We're going to start with a special round." "Carter," he said, emphasizing her last name with a sarcastic tinge. "You'll roll first. Full match." 3 minutes. Your opponent, Jason. Jason Torres was Rojas's star student, black belt. 28 years old, regional champion, and someone Naomi had watched roll a dozen times. Fast, technical, but ruthless. Naomi took a breath, gave a small bow, and stepped onto the mat. Jason followed, mouth tight, expression unreadable. As he faced her, he muttered under his breath, "This isn't personal." She gave him nothing but a nod in return. The timer buzzed. Jason came in fast, too fast for a clean opener. Naomi shifted her weight back, caught his sleeve, and pivoted into open guard. He was testing her base early, going heavy with pressure. She recognized it for what it was, a message. She responded with angles, not force. With technique, not panic. 30 seconds in, he passed her guard. But by the 40-second mark, she'd recovered butterfly hooks and flipped the position, taking top control. Gasps echoed from the sideline. Rojas said nothing. By minute 2, Naomi had Jason in a deep triangle setup. He escaped, barely. At 2:45, she reversed a single-leg takedown into a mounted guillotine, locked tight. Jason tapped just as the timer buzzed. The room fell silent. Naomi stood, bowed, and extended a hand. Jason took it without hesitation, nodded once, and walked off the mat. Before the next round could begin, Rojas's voice cut through the quiet. "Stop the timer." All eyes turned. "New round," he said, already stepping onto the mat. "Naomi, with me." She felt her pulse spike. Trey stepped forward, clearly alarmed. "Vincent, we didn't schedule this."
I'm calling it now, Rojas said, not looking away from Naomi. Unless she's not up for it. Naomi didn't flinch.
I'm here to train. Gasps and murmurs flared along the edge of the mats. She bowed. He didn't.
The timer started. Rojas charged hard, trying to take control early. He wasn't trying to test her technique. He was trying to break her. Naomi countered with every ounce of precision she had. She defended, slipped under, escaped. Each second dragged like a test of her very identity. Midway through the round, he went for a knee-on-belly pressure pass, grinding his forearm across her throat, clearly illegal in regular sparring. She pushed back, framed and slipped out, returning to guard. "You going to cry, Carter?" he hissed, just loud enough for her to hear. She didn't answer. He lunged for a collar choke, but his weight was off. Naomi swept his base, took his back, and hooked both legs in. And then, silence. Everyone watching could see what was happening. She had Rojas's back. Fully controlled, hands locking around his jawline, slowly shifting toward the choke. "You should tap," she said, her voice calm and low. He growled under his breath, "You don't belong here!" And she responded by locking the rear naked choke perfectly. 4 seconds later, he tapped. The gym went still. Naomi released him, rolled off, and stood. No applause. No cheers. Just truth. Trey stepped forward slowly. "Class dismissed." Rojas didn't move. He stayed on his knees, gasping. Naomi walked to the edge of the mat, picked up her water bottle, and slung her bag over her shoulder. As she passed Trey, she met his eyes. He nodded once, then looked toward the rest of the students who were watching with open mouths and stunned silence. Outside, Naomi didn't stop walking until she reached the street. Her hands were still, but something had shifted inside her. Not just power. Proof. They couldn't erase her anymore. Naomi sat in her car in the parking lot of Elite Edge Academy, her fingers resting lightly on the steering wheel. The sun was starting to dip low, casting long shadows across the concrete. She hadn't turned the engine on yet. She just needed a moment. Her phone buzzed in the console beside her. A text from Dr. Eliza Monroe, the university contact she'd been quietly working with. Footage reviewed. Presentation approved. Conference date locked. "You were right to record everything." Naomi exhaled. She had the receipts. The choke, the disrespect, the moment she tapped out Rojas in front of everyone. All of it had been caught on Sarah's hidden camera, just as planned. But the sense of victory wasn't as clean as she expected, because even now, she knew this wasn't over. Not in a place like this. Not when power was being challenged. She stepped out of the car and headed back inside. Rojas wasn't in the gym the next morning, nor the day after that, but whispers traveled faster than drills. Word had gotten out that Naomi, the woman some had laughed at 2 weeks ago, had submitted the head coach. Some students watched her with newfound curiosity. A few avoided her altogether. And one, Jason, came up to her after class and said simply, "That wasn't luck." Naomi thanked him, then kept training. Quiet. Focused, present. Until Thursday night arrived, and everything changed again. The moment she walked into the lobby, she knew something was off. Trey wasn't at the desk like usual. The air smelled like fresh cleaned mats and tension. On the bulletin board beside the water cooler, a new sign had been posted. Effective immediately. All rank verifications required. It was a policy change, and it was a message. She walked into the locker room. Sarah was waiting inside. "You see the bulletin?" Sarah asked. Naomi nodded. "He's coming for me. You gonna stay?" Naomi didn't answer right away. Depends what he tries. On the mats, the atmosphere was colder than usual.
Rojas had returned. He stood at the front of the class, arms crossed, a clipboard in hand. His black belt looked newer than the one he usually wore.
Without a word, he handed Naomi a form. Per our revised policy, he said, loud enough for half the class to hear. We need documentation for all advanced ranks. No exceptions.
Especially for those who didn't come through traditional certification systems. Naomi looked at the form, then at him. You mean black practitioners who didn't pay their way through every belt level? She said evenly. Rojas's jaw tightened. I mean those who show up uninvited and cause disruption. This is standardization, not discrimination. Naomi held the form in her hand, her fingers curling around the edges.
Funny. No one asked Jason for his lineage. Jason, who had just stepped onto the mat, looked up sharply. Rojas waved the clipboard.
This isn't about race. It's about reputation, about protecting the integrity of this academy. Naomi looked at the students gathered behind him.
Some uncomfortable, some eager to see what came next. Whose reputation? She asked.
Yours? The question hung in the air like smoke. Before Rojas could answer, Trey stepped forward. Coach, he said slowly, we've never required paperwork for students who come from private schools.
We've accepted referrals before.
Rojas turned to him.
Are you questioning me? I'm asking why this rule starts today, and with her. For a brief moment, the tension cracked. Naomi saw it, hesitation, maybe even fear, flicker in Rojas's eyes. He stepped back. Let's begin class. But the damage had been done. Naomi drilled hard that night, sharper, cleaner. Not for show, for herself. And when class ended, she handed the form back to Rojas. Blank. You already know who trained me, she said. But if you want it on paper, I'll bring it next week. Signed by someone you used to idolize before your ego outgrew your memory. He stared at her, chest heaving slightly. Don't mistake stubbornness for credibility, he said quietly. Naomi smiled.
Don't mistake position for respect. She turned and walked off the mat, Sarah following her out. They didn't need to look back to know the rest of the class was still watching. Outside, the air was cooler now.
Naomi took a breath, deeper this time. Are you ready to go public? Sarah asked, her voice low. Naomi looked up at the darkening sky. Not yet, she said, but I'm almost there. And this time, it wasn't just about tapping someone out. It was about tearing something down and rebuilding it right. Naomi stared at her laptop screen late that night, surrounded by stacks of old journals, training footage, and the certificate that had once hung quietly in her grandfather's home dojo. Her black belt embroidered with gold thread, Naomi Carter, disciple of Victor Carter, rested beside her coffee cup, coiled like a silent witness to everything she'd endured over the last few weeks. Her inbox blinked with a new message. Subject, confirmed keynote slot, National Martial Arts Ethics Symposium, Chicago. She let out a quiet breath. This was it. The presentation she and Sarah had worked on for months was finally ready to go public. Her footage would be seen by instructors, gym owners, and coaches across the country. Not to shame one man, but to reveal the rot in a system that had turned a philosophy of respect into an ego contest. And yet, something didn't sit right. Because even with a keynote, even with video proof, Rojas still controlled the narrative inside Elite Edge, still stood at the front of the class, still wielded unearned authority over students who were too afraid or too conditioned to push back. She didn't just want to expose him. She needed to dismantle the system that allowed him to thrive.
The next morning, Naomi arrived early at the academy. Not in her GE, in jeans, a black hoodie and sneakers. She headed straight for the front desk where Trey was sipping a protein shake, bleary-eyed from the night shift. "You're early," he mumbled. "I need the student roster," Naomi said. Trey blinked. "What for?" "I'm organizing a private seminar, off-site." "Optional, but I want to invite the women from our class directly." Trey hesitated. "You're serious?" "I'm done waiting for Rojas to change this place. I'm going to show the students what jiu-jitsu really looks like." He didn't say anything at first, then slowly reached for a drawer and handed her a printed list. "Keep it quiet." "But I'll be there." She gave him a nod. That evening, she sent personal invitations to 10 women who had either drifted away from the academy or had spoken up privately about feeling unwelcome. She titled the event, "Jiu-Jitsu Without Ego, a workshop for respectful mastery." 2 days later, in a rented rec center 10 miles from Elite Edge, Naomi walked into the modest mat space to find 8 of them already waiting, plus 3 others she didn't recognize. Friends, sisters, curious onlookers. And Sarah, of course, setting up cameras on the back wall. Naomi stepped to the center of the mat, wearing her black G this time, with her real belt tied firmly at her waist. "Before we begin," she said, "I want you to know who I really am." She told them the truth. About the Carter family lineage, about her grandfather's training, about why she'd entered Elite Edge under a brown belt, alias "Rojas humiliated me because he thought I was weak," she said. "And in doing so, he revealed exactly the kind of weakness this art is supposed to overcome." They trained for 3 hours, not to dominate. Not to break down, but to understand. Naomi taught defensive drills, breathing techniques, pressure flow transitions, skills focused not on aggression, but awareness. When the session ended, the women didn't rush out. They lingered. "Can we do this weekly?" one asked. Naomi smiled. "We can do better. We can build our own space." The moment she said it, the energy in the room shifted. She wasn't just teaching a class anymore. She was laying the foundation for something bigger. But word travels fast. On Monday night, Rojas called Naomi to his office. She walked in, calm and collected. He didn't look up at first. Just tapped a pen against his desk. "You've been recruiting my students?" "They're not yours," she said simply. He leaned back. "You're turning this into a war." "No. You already did that the day you dismissed me for being a woman. For being black." "For not fitting your mold." Rojas stood. "You think anyone will take you seriously once they know you lied about your rank?" Naomi met his eyes. "I never lied." "I just didn't lead with what you needed to respect me." He opened his mouth, but Naomi cut him off. "I'll be presenting at the National Symposium in Chicago next month. Your name won't be mentioned." "But the footage, your methods, your mockery, it'll all be seen, and they'll know exactly what kind of culture you run here." For the first time, Rojas didn't have a comeback. She stepped toward the door. "One more thing," she added. "Several students are leaving next week. They're coming with me. And some of your instructors are thinking about it too." "You're bluffing," he growled. Naomi gave him a look that chilled the air. "Try me." That night, when she walked out of Elite Edge, she didn't look back. She was done reacting. Now she was leading. The auditorium at the National Martial Arts Ethics Symposium in Chicago buzzed with quiet conversation as instructors, athletes, and school owners took their seats. The sleek space, lit with soft spotlights and draped in navy banners displaying words like integrity, evolution, and community, felt worlds away from the heavy mats and harsh fluorescent lights of Elite Edge Academy. Naomi stood backstage, her hands lightly gripping the edge of the podium. She wore a tailored black blazer over a simple white blouse, and her black belt peeked slightly from the duffel bag resting by her feet. Sarah stood behind the camera they had set up on a tripod near the back row, giving her a subtle thumbs up. She exhaled slowly. This wasn't a match. It wasn't a sparring session, but the stakes were just as real, because here in this room were the people who shaped martial arts culture across the country. And today, they were going to hear the truth. When the moderator called her name, Naomi stepped onto the stage to a polite round of applause. She adjusted the mic and scanned the crowd, not looking for approval but connection.
"I wasn't supposed to be here," she began. "I was supposed to follow the unspoken rules, blend in. Play nice, keep quiet." A few heads tilted, curious. "But my grandfather, Victor Carter, taught me something different." "He taught me that silence doesn't protect legacy. It erases it." The mention of her grandfather drew a few surprised murmurs. His name still carried weight, even in rooms where his teachings had been forgotten. Naomi clicked the remote, and a screen behind her came to life. What followed wasn't a takedown. It was an education. Clips played, footage Sarah had recorded inside Elite Edge. A young female student being ridiculed for lack of aggression. An instructor, Gabriel Rojas, publicly challenging Naomi the moment he slammed her during a demonstration. His mocking comments about women, about tradition, and finally the 15-second submission that left the class stunned, silent. The room didn't erupt. It stilled, because the lesson wasn't in her victory, it was in the build-up. In every condescending glance, every word said too loud for privacy, yet soft enough for plausible deniability. Every calculated dismissal masked as just training. Naomi turned from the screen. "This is not a personal vendetta," she said. "This is a systemic culture that punishes humility and rewards bravado, that dismisses students based on gender, race, or perceived weakness, while forgetting that jiu-jitsu was built on the premise that technique and heart beat brute force." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I spent months in a school like this, not to destroy it, but to understand how we let it happen." A hand went up from the audience. It belonged to a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a GI patch that read Pacific Gracie. "Did you ever consider just reporting the academy instead of going undercover?" Naomi's answer was calm but firm.
"I've seen reports buried, whistleblowers blacklisted. This story needed to be told from the inside."
"And I had the privilege and platform to do it when others didn't." Another voice, a woman from the back, stood up. "What do we do now?" That was the moment Naomi had been waiting for. "You do what my grandfather always taught me," she said. "You lead with respect. You listen before you correct. You make room for every student who walks through your door, regardless of how they look or what rank they wear. And if your culture isn't built for that, you tear it down and build it better." She stepped back as the crowd stood, applauding not just the talk, but the challenge it represented. Backstage, Sarah met her with a proud grin. "You just rewrote the playbook." Naomi didn't smile. Not yet. Because back in California, something else was happening. While Naomi spoke, news had broken online. A video clip of her submission over Rojas, leaked not by Sarah, but by an anonymous student at Elite Edge, had gone viral. Martial arts forums lit up. Comments poured in. "Is this the future of jiu-jitsu?" "She handled that like a master." "This is what happens when ego meets legacy." And then came the fallout. Within 24 hours, Rojas had issued a defensive statement. "Misunderstood training context. Performance taken out of proportion. We take inclusion seriously." But it was too late. Former students spoke up. Emails surfaced.
Instructors at other academies began cutting ties. Sponsors pulled funding. By the end of the week, the board overseeing Elite Edge facilities suspended Rojas pending investigation. His name was removed from 2 upcoming tournaments. Naomi didn't celebrate. She organized. The women from her off-site seminar helped her scout locations for a new space, one that wouldn't carry the name Elite anything. Just open ground jiu-jitsu. A space without hierarchy, where newcomers were guided, not tested. One evening, as she painted the final letters of the new studio sign, Trey arrived carrying boxes of donated mats. "I quit today," he said. "Told them I was done making excuses for people I couldn't respect." Naomi nodded and helped him unpack. Later, she sat alone on the freshly laid mats, staring at the empty walls. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and for the first time in a long time, Naomi felt like she wasn't fighting uphill alone. She was carving a path for others to follow. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of open ground jiu-jitsu, casting soft golden rays over the pristine mats. Naomi stood in the center of the training floor, barefoot, breathing in the quiet, before the day began. The studio smelled of fresh paint, new canvas, and the subtle presence of lavender oil Sarah had started using in the lobby diffuser. Naomi's black gi fit like armor, elegant, worn, and fully hers. On her belt, her grandfather's initials were now stitched beside her own. The academy wasn't officially open yet, but the buzz was already circling. Applications flooded in from women, teens, veterans, even former students of Elite Edge looking for a place to start over. Across the room, Sarah entered carrying 2 coffees. "They're already lining up outside, like literally a whole line." Naomi smiled, accepting the cup. "Good. Let them see what this place is about." The grand opening had barely been announced before it gained traction across martial arts forums, news outlets, and even TEDx invites. Not because of scandal, but because of what Naomi built in its aftermath. A dojo grounded in transparency, discipline, and community. Outside, a local news crew was setting up. The story of the woman who submitted the system had gained new life, not because Naomi had bested Rojas, but because she had offered something better in its place, something lasting. Inside, Naomi sat with Trey and a group of instructors she had personally recruited, coaches from diverse backgrounds who believed in elevating students, not shaming them. A new whiteboard hung on the wall. Technique, respect, resilience. Trey leaned over, watching through the glass. "You ready for this?" Naomi took a breath. More than ever. The doors opened, and a steady stream of new faces entered, some smiling nervously, others stepping cautiously across the threshold. Naomi greeted each one, pausing to kneel before a young black girl, no older than 10, her braids tied in bright purple bands. "Is this your first time on a mat?" Naomi asked gently. The girl nodded. "My brother said jiu-jitsu was for boys, but I want to learn." Naomi offered her hand. "Then you're in the right place." As the studio filled with movement and sound, Naomi took her place in front of the class. Rows of students faced her, eyes wide, eager. "This isn't just a gym," she said. "It's a promise. That you don't need to fit into a mold to belong here. That your strength isn't judged by volume, but by consistency. And that no matter who you are or where you come from, you have a place on these mats." She nodded towards Sarah, who stood by the camera, recording again. This time not for exposure, but for history. After class, as the buzz of conversation filled the space, Naomi stepped outside for a moment alone. The street was quiet. But in her heart it was loud with something powerful, not revenge, not triumph. Freedom. Just as she turned to head back in, Her phone buzzed. A message from a familiar number. Gabriel Rojas. I heard what you built. I'm still learning. Thank you for starting what I didn't have the courage to. She stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Naomi Carter. It's never too late to start over, but only if you mean it.
Back inside, Sarah was hanging a framed photo near the door, an image of Naomi training with her grandfather in their old garage, her tiny hands gripping his jai with unbreakable focus. Beneath it, a plaque read, "True power lies not in domination, but in the courage to uplift." The room quieted as Naomi stood before the class one last time that day. "If you take anything with you when you leave this mat," she said, "let it be this. Your value does not need to be proven to anyone. It just needs to be lived." As applause filled the room, Naomi let her eyes close for a beat, letting it sink in. The weight of the past, the scars from being doubted, mocked, minimized, they hadn't vanished, but they no longer owned her. She had submitted not just her opponent, but the very culture that sought to shrink her. And she had done it not by raising her voice, but by refusing to stay silent. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. Click subscribe and help us keep telling stories that matter. Stories that reveal not just who we fight, but what we fight for. And always remember, the world will try to label you, limit you, define you, but your power, it's yours to choose.